And we're live.
Yeah.
Derek, what happens if teenagers, like during puberty, take test or TRT? Like, I see guys on SARMs, and I guess I think I'm talking about high school kids probably making bad decisions. Like, what goes on there? Do you know?
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on how far they push it, because they're already going through puberty with their testosterone peaking anyway. So if they shut themselves down, but they're on like a replacement amount of tests, it might just be the equivalent outcome realistically. However, if you have like dysregulated estrogen, like you have a tightly regulated amount of estrogenic conversion in your body. And when you have like your brain and your balls are determining how much you get, it's a bit different than when you're injecting something and you're kind of like ballparking manually. So there's like an argument to be made that if you have too much estrogenic signaling in your bones, you might like prematurely stunt your growth, especially when you try and come off the gear. You end up in like a low T state while you try and like post-cycle therapy recover back to baseline. You might hinder some sort of growth in your actual bone formation to some extent. I'm not saying that's definitely going to happen, because there are a lot of guys who took gear very young that still got taller, but it's like in general too, I just wouldn't fuck with anything that hasn't really completed maturation, like especially brain development, signaling with a bunch of androgens. Like it's different. I'm not going to say it's different when you use test versus like other steroids when you're a teen, but it's like ultimately when you're fucking with the actual tightly regulated mechanisms that determine how much, stimulation your brain gets, how much, spitting out of your balls, how much is getting to these bones, you're starting to manually cause changes or lack of development in certain areas of your brain potentially that I am certain there's guys who've used steroids too young who've permanently altered their brain chemistry and permanently act different because of it. And they just don't realize it. So
what's too young? Like, so like what do they say? Your frontal cortex finishes at 25. For some reason I was like 21 is fully out of puberty, but maybe still too young.
In general, if you were to really put a cutoff on like, you probably shouldn't use anything like really synthetic and, like not bioidentical, as in not like just plain testosterone, like a, something crazy like a fucking trenbolone or something. There's an argument to be made that you wait until you're 25 because your brain is not going to be as easily manipulated / altered in some permanent aspect that's going to fuck with your like forever potentially. However, like the general rule of thumb is wait until you're fully grown, like stature wise, which could be, 19, 20, whatever. But in general, like my recommendation, because I know a lot of guys aren't going to wait till they're 25, is at least have a couple years under your belt of like training and diet, or understand it thoroughly and educate yourself. Because a lot of people, they go into it without understanding this, without the proper guidance, without the proper whatever. And if you go in haphazardly to hormone assistance, like especially, it's different if you like actually medically require TRT, like versus a guy who's like a teenager trying to just like blast super physiological amounts of hormones. If you're exposing yourself to like dangerous amounts of hormones and you don't have your diet dialed in, your training, you're like wasting your organ stress essentially to expose yourself to this shit. So it's like, make sure everything is dialed in so you can actually take advantage of the organ stress while you're under, that burden essentially. So like to answer your question, I would say once you've reached full stature development, which how are you going to determine that? Like, I guess you could get like an x-ray of like your bones and like see if shit has closed or not, like the growth plates and whatnot. But above and beyond that too, just like having a comprehensive understanding of how hormones work, or at least a reasonable one, given that if you don't have, it depends if you have a doctor overseeing your care or not, because a teenager is not going to get prescribed TRT unless they have, some sort of, I don't know, they got kicked in the nuts by a fucking horse and now their balls don't work. Like, I don't know, some weird situation like that. Maybe you need TRT. But for guys who are like 17 or like, I just want to get on TRT to get jacked, those individuals probably shouldn't be touching it regardless. Like I'd wait until you're ready to dive into hormones because you understand them, you've reached full stature development, and you actually understand it to a point where you can do it without, like, you're not going to have a doctor overseeing your care if you're like 19 and you have perfect hormones. So
it sounds like if you're 23, you're kind of thumbs up on a bioidentical.
I'm not thumbs up, but I mean like,
okay.
Yeah, you know what I mean? You know what I mean,
no,
right? Like,
I'm listening.
Yeah, it's just different for everyone.
Yeah. So like ultimately, if you've educated yourself and you have everything dialed in and you want to explore that, like that would be a time where sure, you're not in like a high risk state. Let's put it that way.
if you buy tea out of some random locker room at the gym, are you getting tea or are they just selling you Wesson oil in a fancy bottle? Like, how often do they fuck with you?
Well, now it's so cheap to synthesize it and to, sell it that it's most often like you're not going to get totally bunk shit a lot of the time. The problem is the sterility of it. Like you literally have some literally a meathead chemist in his kitchen making this shit. And who knows, like if he has like cleaned his equipment properly, if he's done
Probably
whatever.
not. That's horrifying.
Do you ever go to the Steroids subreddit?
No.
And see those guys synthesizing their own shit? Oh,
are they doing it safely?
I think
they are.
I think this is how a lot of people get popped in professional sports too. Is they use, like, for example, if you're trying to get a designer drug made and the equipment is still tainted with something that is detectable, like a Tylenol or like something like that, and then you pop for something and it's like, oh, I wasn't even taking that. It's like, well, maybe it didn't come from your supplement you took that you claim it did. Maybe it came from your underground gear that you were trying to get around tests with, and you got something that you didn't know was in there. Like there's a lot of circumstances that you might get not what you think it is. In general, the more exotic compounds are going to be faked with shit. Like Primobolan is a very expensive and like refined steroid. You might just get testosterone instead of Primo. But test itself, very cheap. Other than the sterility and the purity of it, like maybe they'll cheap out and give you like 50 milligrams less or whatever. But in general, when you buy test, you'll get test.
I've seen people on online talking about trying to get oxandrolone and ending up with Winstrol.
And then if a chick thinks she's getting Anavar and then she gets like whatever compound that the chemist decides to put in place because it's cheaper, end up with the fat clit, all the androgenic side effects.
Yeah, she thinks she's taking her 5 milligrams of Anavar and she's really taking just a fat dose of some real shit. And like you said, now she has a penis. Now she has a penis and she looks like Chris Cyborg.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she's going to kill it on Grindr. That's the whole
point. Yeah, I wonder. I don't remember what Chris Cyborg popped for. I think it was like some sort of
was it
some agent to remove like evidence of a steroid, like something like that, a diuretic of some kind. I think that's what she popped for. I don't remember if she ever got popped for like X compound or Y compound, something like that. I don't recall. But like looking at her bone structure, I would like to see pictures of her when she's like 18, 19 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
It looks like she, hang on, what'd you write there, Zach? She revealed that she tested positive for
Winstrol. In 2012, she tested positive for Winstrol.
Literally what I said. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Wait, that doesn't say Winstrol. Did you translate it? Is that what spironolactone?
The spironolactone is L-dactone. That's a diuretic. But in the Wikipedia, doping violations and suspensions in 2012, January 6, 2012, it was announced that Cyborg had tested positive for stanozolol, an anabolic steroid, which is the chemical name for Winstrol.
Glad we had you here. I wouldn't have known.
I would have thought the spina bifida or whatever the fuck that said was the steroid.